All right, so we've got some research here all about bear hibernation. Pretty fascinating stuff. You think about it. It's incredible, an animal that big basically hitting the pause button on life for months at a time. And we're not just talking like a long nap, right? This is like a whole other level of biological wonder. I can really get into it today. What are scientists learning about how bears do this? Why is it so different from how other animals hibernate? What could it mean for them as the climate changes and gets weirder and weirder? And get this, there's even some potential for this research to change human health and maybe even help with space travel. I mean, who knows? So to help us make sense of all this, we've got an expert here who can break down all the complex science and connect what's happening in the animal world with, potential breakthroughs for us. Let's start with the basics. I'm looking at this visual you sent from one of the articles. It shows all these different animals and their hibernation or torpor patterns, hummingbirds all the way to like massive bears. That's right. It's wild how many different animals do this.
Yeah, it really is across the whole animal kingdom. And you're right to focus on bears. They're kind of the kings of hibernation. And they don't even do it the same way a lot of animals do. Like, take Arctic ground squirrels. Their body temperature can get close to like -3 degrees Celsius. But bears stay relatively warm the whole time they're hibernating.
Whoa, so they're not like freezing solid like some of those smaller hibernators, but they're still considered hibernators even though their temperature doesn't plummet.
Exactly. It all comes down to how much their metabolism slows down. They can basically pause their life for months. They barely move, breathe, their heart rate drops way down. It's really amazing when you think about how huge they are.
It's like they figured out how to slow down time. And speaking of crazy stuff, you mentioned that article about mother bears nursing their cubs while they're hibernating. I mean, that's mind-blowing. They're not eating or drinking anything. So they're literally using only their stored-up resources to feed their babies. How is that even possible?
It's really a testament to how incredibly adapted they are. If we humans tried to stay inactive like that for so long, we'd lose muscle mass and our bones would weaken. But bears have figured out a way around that. There was some recent research you sent. It showed that they can switch off certain genes that are responsible for breaking down bone while they're hibernating.
That's wild. How do they switch those genes off? Is that something that's unique to bears? Or could we use that research to help humans who have bone loss, like osteoporosis?
Those are great questions, and scientists are trying to figure that out. One idea is that maybe certain hormones are acting as signals to control those genes. Maybe those hormones are triggered by changes in daylight or when food becomes scarce. If we can understand how bears do this, it could lead to new treatments for people.
Okay, so they've got the bone loss thing figured out. But how do they slow their breathing and heart rate so much without getting super cold? Right. It's like they're pulling off some kind of metabolic magic trick.
It's a truly amazing display of energy conservation. The research suggests that it has to do with how they use stored fat for energy and how they minimize how much heat they lose. It makes sense if you think about it. Rewarming a giant bear from near freezing would take a massive amount of energy. Their strategy is super efficient.
Makes sense. So they've evolved to be super energy efficient. I wonder if we could use that knowledge to help astronauts on really long space missions. Could we put them in a hibernation state for space travel?
That's a really interesting question, and it's something scientists are definitely looking into. But for now, putting astronauts into actual hibernation is still pretty sci-fi. There are some medical applications that are showing more promise. Like, imagine being able to induce a hibernation-like state in someone having a stroke or a heart attack. It would give doctors way more time to save them.
You sent an article about a proposal from 2021 to test this in humans. And they got the idea from hibernating animals. This research could be a game changer. It seems like we've got a lot to learn from these creatures. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about how bears decide when to hibernate in the first place. Some animals are on a strict schedule, right? Based on how long the days are. But bears seem to be a bit more flexible. They pay attention to cues in their environment, don't they?
Right. It's not just the calendar for them. It's a lot more about the environment and their own body, food temperature, how much fat they've stored up.
Oh, so it's about being in tune with their surroundings. Makes sense. But how do scientists actually figure out these hibernation patterns? Like that research you mentioned by Johnson and Evans.
Well, they're using some pretty cool tech. Everything from satellite collars to monitors they implant in the bears. Those monitors track their heart rate, body temperature, all that stuff. So we get a much clearer picture of what's going on throughout the year, including, during hibernation.
So what are they finding out? Are bears sticking to their usual hibernation schedules? Or is climate change messing things up?
It's looking more and more like climate change is having an impact. You mentioned Johnson's research with the black bears in Colorado. They found that in warmer springs, the bears are coming out of their dens earlier. And Evans' work with brown bears in Scandinavia shows that they seem to wait for a certain temperature before they come out. But warmer winters could really throw off these routines.
So if it's a warm spring, they might wake up earlier than they should. What kind of risks does that pose to the bears?
Well, for one thing, their food might not be ready yet. That could lead to, more competition for resources, maybe even starvation. Plus, if they're out and about earlier, there's a higher chance of running into humans, which can be dangerous for the bears.
Yeah, so it's a delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
If they come out too early, it could be bad. But if spring comes early and they stay in their dens too long, that's a problem too, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. If there's a warm spell and a bear thinks it's spring, but then it gets cold again, they're in trouble. They've already used up a lot of their stored fat. And it might be hard to find enough food until the real spring comes.
Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. But, bears are incredibly adaptable. You mentioned some populations have stopped hibernating altogether.
Oh, yeah. It's really interesting you sent those articles about the brown bears in Greece and Croatia. They don't hibernate at all. Researchers think it's because the climate is milder there and they can find food year-round.
Wow, so they've actually changed their behavior because of the environment.
Exactly. And there are other adaptations, too, like their gut microbiome, the bacteria in their digestive system.
Oh, yeah. What's going on there?
Well, it turns out the makeup of their gut microbiome changes a lot when they're getting ready for hibernation. Certain types of bacteria become more common, and those bacteria help them get as much energy as possible from their food, and they also help prepare their digestive system for not eating for a long time.
So it's like these little microbes are part of their hibernation strategy.
It just goes to show how complex hibernation really is. It's not just sleeping through the winter. It's a whole bunch of changes happening in their bodies.
Speaking of fascinating changes, I was reading one of the articles you sent about tau proteins in the brains of hibernating animals, and that really caught my attention because tau proteins are linked to Alzheimer's disease in humans.
That's right. It's a really interesting area of research. Scientists have found that tau proteins build up in the brains of hibernating bears and squirrels. But here's the crazy thing. They don't seem to have any negative effects.
Wait, so they're building up these proteins that can cause brain damage in humans, but they're totally fine. How is that possible?
That's the million-dollar question. One theory is that maybe these tau proteins actually protect the brain during hibernation. Maybe they help keep the neurons stable when the brain's not as active. Then when the animals wake up, their brains can clear out the tau tangles.
So instead of being a bad thing, the tau proteins might be helping them.
It's pretty incredible. And if we can figure out how they do it, it could have huge implications for treating Alzheimer's and other brain diseases. Like you mentioned that research with mice. They were able to induce a hibernation-like state in mice that had a condition similar to Alzheimer's. It's still early days, but it suggests there might be a connection between hibernation and brain health.
That's amazing research.
It really is, and it just goes to show how much we can learn from these animals.
So we've talked about the changes in their metabolism, their gut microbiome, their brains, and how climate change is affecting everything. But there's one more thing I want to touch on. You included an article about a protein that basically kicks off the whole hibernation process.
You mean the hibernation induction trigger?
Yes, HIT. It sounds like something out of a comic book.
Well, it's definitely a powerful molecule.
Yeah.
Scientists are still figuring out exactly how it works, but it seems like HIT plays a key role in starting all the changes that are needed for hibernation. It's like flipping a switch from active mode to hibernation mode.
So it's the master controller for the whole process. It's amazing how one tiny molecule can have such a big effect on an animal's body.
It really is a testament to the power of evolution. Over millions of years, bears have developed these incredible adaptations to survive some of the harshest conditions on Earth.
It makes you appreciate how tough they are. But as we've been talking about, the challenges they face are changing, and their future is uncertain. So in the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore how climate change might affect bear hibernation even more, and what that could mean for these amazing creatures. So we've talked about a lot, all the changes that happen in their bodies when they hibernate, and all that amazing research that could help humans and the impact of climate change. But it is a bit unnerving to think about, we're messing with their environment and we're not really sure what's going to happen.
What are scientists most worried about when it comes to climate change and bears hibernating? Well, one of the biggest concerns is that the bears might wake up and there's no food. With temperatures rising, the bears might come out of hibernation earlier, but their food sources might not be ready yet, and that could be a real problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about when they wake up, it's about the timing of everything else, too.
Yeah.
Like that article you sent about the black bears in the Rocky Mountains. They're coming out earlier, but the berries they eat aren't ripe yet.
Exactly. That's what we call a nutritional mismatch. And it can have serious consequences for the bears, especially the cubs. And climate change is affecting other things too, like snowpack. Some bears need deep snow to insulate their dens, and in some areas there's just not enough snow anymore.
We talked about those bears in Greece and Croatia that don't hibernate anymore. Could we see that happening in other places as the planet gets warmer?
It's definitely possible bears are incredibly adaptable. They've evolved to live in all kinds of environments. Some populations might move to higher elevations or further north where it's cooler. Others might change their hibernation patterns or even stop hibernating altogether if they can find food.
That's amazing how they can adjust like that.
Yeah.
But climate change is happening so fast. Do bears have enough time to adapt? Is there anything we can do to help them?
That's where conservation comes in. We need to protect their habitats and make sure they have enough space to roam and find good denning sites. And we need to do a better job of preventing conflicts between humans and bears. Educating people about how to live alongside bears and being responsible with our garbage.
So it's not just about studying them, it's about making sure they have a future.
Exactly. And I think there's a bigger lesson here, too. By studying how bears are dealing with climate change, we can learn about how other species might adapt, including humans.
Yeah, it makes you realize we're all connected in this. The problems bears are facing are our problems too.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the most important things to remember. Bears are more than just these fascinating creatures. They're a sign of how healthy our ecosystems are. By studying them, we're learning about ourselves and the world we're creating.
Well said. This has been a really incredible deep dive. We've learned so much about how bears hibernate. And it's amazing to think that what we're learning from them could help humans in so many ways. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we need to respect nature and try to protect it. Bears have shown us how resilient and adaptable they are, and we can learn a lot from them as we face the challenges of a changing world. Let's hope we can all work together to make sure that both humans and wildlife can thrive.